The Silent Rebellion. For 3 decades, Earth had endured the galactic hegemony's benevolent guidance, a guidance that felt more like chains with each passing year. What had begun as seemingly beneficial first contact had evolved into subjugation disguised as protection. Humanity found itself at the bottom of an interstellar hierarchy, our homeworld reduced to a resource extraction colony, while alien overseers dictated every aspect of our development. In the secured underground chamber beneath what had once been Geneva, Commander Elena Reyes studied the holographic projection of the hegemony's orbital stations. 12 massive structures positioned precisely in Earth's orbit, each housing thousands of the reptilian Dracarian forcers and the insectoid Venka administrators. The aliens called them cooperation platforms. Humanity had more colorful names for them. Status report, Reyes demanded, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent half her life preparing for this day. Dr. Marcus Chen, Earth's foremost physicist and the architect of Project Lazarus, stepped forward. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but excitement radiated from him like heat. "It's ready, Commander. All systems are primed, and the network has achieved synchronization at 98.7% efficiency, better than we projected." Reyes allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 3 decades of patience, of playing the obedient species while secretly preparing. The hegemony had permitted humans limited technological development, carefully monitoring what they considered appropriate advancement for a species they deemed primitive and volatile. They didn't know that humanity had been keeping secrets. The Centauri array detected increased chatter from the Hegemony Council, reported Communications Officer Liam Santiago. They're planning to implement Phase 3 next month. A murmur of concern rippled through the chamber. Phase 3, the dissolution of all remaining human governments and direct hegemony control of Earth's population. The final stage of their integration protocol that would render humanity little more than slaves. Then we move tonight, Reyes decided. They'll never expect it. Indeed, why would they? In the eyes of the galactic hegemony, humans were an amusing but ultimately unimpressive species. Quick to anger, slow to advance, chaotic in their thinking. The hegemony had encountered hundreds of species across the galaxy, and all had either been assimilated peacefully or subdued through superior force. Humanity had appeared to choose the former, accepting their place as a client race. But the hegemony had fundamentally misunderstood something about humans. Lieutenant Amara Okafor, head of military operations, displayed the tactical overview. "We've confirmed that all 12 orbital platforms are currently operating at standard staffing levels. Their defensive systems run on predictable rotation cycles. We've identified a 3.8-second vulnerability window during each cycle." "And that's enough?" Reyes asked. "With what Dr. Chen has built." "More than enough." 20 years earlier, a human archaeological expedition had discovered something extraordinary in the Atacama Desert. A crashed spacecraft of unknown origin, predating human civilization by thousands of years. The hegemony had strict protocols about reporting such finds, but the discovery had been quietly kept secret. Inside that ancient vessel lay technological concepts that even the hegemony hadn't mastered, particularly regarding quantum field manipulation. While appearing to develop only permitted technologies, Earth's best minds had been secretly reverse engineering and advancing these concepts, creating something unprecedented: the quantum displacement network. A system that could instantaneously relocate matter through space without traversing the intervening distance, bypassing all known detection methods. The QDN nodes are positioned at all critical locations, Dr. Chen confirmed. Strike teams are equipped with phase-shift armor derived from the Atacama technology. They'll be invisible to hegemony sensors. Reyes looked around the room at the faces of Earth's last hope. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and strategists who had lived double lives for years. Working acceptable jobs under hegemony supervision by day, then disappearing into secret facilities by night to prepare for this moment. "The hegemony believes they've studied us thoroughly," Reyes said. They think they understand human psychology. They expect either complete submission or a desperate emotional uprising that they can easily crush. They're not prepared for what we're about to do. High above Earth, in the Central Command Platform, High Administrator Telkin Vor reviewed the latest behavioral compliance reports with satisfaction. The humans were progressing exactly as predicted by the sociological models. Their resistance had gradually diminished over the years, replaced by resignation and acceptance. Phase 3 implementation would proceed without significant opposition. Administrator, his aide interrupted, we're detecting unusual energy fluctuations in the planetary power grid. Vor dismissed the concern with a wave of his scaled hand. Human infrastructure is notoriously inefficient. Document it for the engineering corps to address next cycle. But sir, the pattern seems. The aide never finished his sentence. Throughout the massive orbital station, reality itself seemed to hiccup. A barely perceptible distortion rippled through the structure, and suddenly, humans were everywhere. Not the compliant service workers permitted on the station, but armored figures materializing directly inside secure areas, bypassing every defense. Across all 12 stations simultaneously, Earth's strike teams emerged from thin air. Their armor, sleek, black, and unlike anything the hegemony had seen before, seemed to bend light around them. Their weapons fired not projectiles or energy beams, but concentrated pulses that temporarily disrupted neural activity, rendering hegemony personnel unconscious without killing them. In the central command hub, Commander Rice herself materialized with her elite team. Administrator Vor found himself surrounded before he could even activate an alarm. What is this? He stammered, his reptilian eyes wide with shock. How did you breach our defenses? That's the problem with believing you're superior, Rice said calmly, removing her helmet. You stop looking for threats. Within 17 minutes, all 12 orbital platforms were under human control. Not a single hegemony life had been taken. This was deliberate. The human forces had tranquilized the alien personnel and secured them in their own detention facilities. All platforms secured. Lieutenant Okafor reported through the comms. QDN performed flawlessly. No casualties on either side. Rice nodded with satisfaction. Initiate Phase 2. Across the solar system, the same scenario played out at every hegemony installation. The research base on Mars, the mining operations on Jupiter's moons, the monitoring stations on Saturn's rings, all fell to perfectly coordinated human forces appearing without warning, using technology the hegemony hadn't believed possible. At exactly the same moment, 12 human vessels, ships whose construction had been hidden beneath the ocean floors, emerged and took position around each captured platform. These weren't the primitive spacecraft the hegemony had permitted humanity to build. These were sleek, advanced vessels incorporating both the ancient alien technology and unique human innovations. On Earth, hidden anti-orbital defense systems activated, creating an impenetrable shield around the planet. Technology the hegemony had believed was centuries beyond human capability. In the captured Central Command Center, Rice addressed the stunned Administrator Vor. For decades, you've treated us as children. Dangerous, unpredictable children who needed to be controlled for our own good and the good of the galaxy. You studied our history and saw only our conflicts, our divisions. You failed to recognize that those same traits drove our greatest achievements. She activated the communication system, broadcasting not just to Earth, but to the entire hegemony network. This is Commander Elena Reyes of Earth. The hegemony presence in the Sol system has been neutralized. Your personnel are unharmed, and will remain so. We have disabled your ability to send distress signals, but we will be sending our own message to your council. Aboard the Hegemony Council's massive station orbiting their homeworld of Drakkar Prime, Sovereign Director Malaxi Vex received the impossible news with disbelief. Impossible, he hissed. The humans could not have developed such technology, not under our supervision. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, The primitive species had concealed an entire technological revolution right under the hegemony's watchful eyes. And now, a human face appeared on the main communication screen of the council chamber. Commander Rice, broadcasting from what was unmistakably the command center of the hegemony's own central Earth platform. Greetings, Director Vex. By now you've confirmed that we have indeed taken control of all hegemony assets in our solar system. We have not harmed your people. This is not an act of vengeance, but one of liberation. Vex's scales flushed with rage. You commit an act of war against the entire hegemony. Our response will be swift and... I wouldn't recommend that, Rise interrupted calmly. You see, while you've been watching us, we've been watching you too. Studying your tactics, your technologies, your weaknesses. The screen split to show multiple feeds, hegemony military bases on distant worlds, administrative centers, mining operations, all with human strike teams already in position, weapons ready, having appeared without warning. The technology that allowed us to take your Earth platforms. It's not limited by distance. Right now, we have teams positioned at 37 critical hegemony installations across your territory. One word from me, and they all fall simultaneously. The council chamber erupted in panic. This was supposed to be impossible. The humans were contained, controlled, monitored. How could they have developed such capabilities in secret? What do you want? Vex finally asked, his voice hollow with the realization of how completely they had underestimated this species. We want what we've always wanted, Rise replied, to determine our own destiny. Earth is declaring independence from the hegemony, effective immediately. We will establish diplomatic relations as equals, not as subjects. She leaned closer to the screen, her expression resolute. You misjudged us, Director. You saw our capacity for aggression and thought it made us dangerous. What you fail to understand is that the same passion that fuels our conflicts also drives our creativity, our determination, our refusal to accept limitations. While you watched for weapons, we were innovating in ways you never imagined. The ultimatum was clear. Acknowledge human independence or face a galaxy-wide insurrection. As the first day of humanity's rebellion came to a close, Commander Reyes stood by the viewport of the captured hegemony platform, looking down at Earth, a planet that, for the first time in 30 years, was truly free. The hegemony had never expected Earth to strike first. They certainly never expected us to strike so effectively. But then again, they had never truly understood what makes humans so unpredictable, our relentless drive to overcome, to adapt, and to define our own place among the stars. And this was just the beginning. The reckoning. The Galactic Hegemony's response fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system exactly 7 Earth days after Commander Rice's ultimatum. It was an impressive display of force. 24 warships, each large enough to house thousands of troops and enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. Admiral Krazek of the Drakari military caste stood on the command deck of the flagship, his scaled hide darkening with anticipation. The humans' rebellion was impressive but ultimately futile. No species had ever successfully broken away from the hegemony. These upstart primates would be made an example of. Begin approach to Earth, he ordered. Activate all weapons systems. Admiral, his second-in-command said hesitantly, shouldn't we attempt communication first? The Council directive suggested. The Council is not here, Krazek interrupted. I am. These humans need to be reminded of their place. The massive fleet moved forward in perfect formation, accelerating toward the inner solar system. Their sensors detected the human ships positioned around Earth, primitive vessels that posed no threat to hegemony warships. The Admiral allowed himself a satisfied smile. This would be over quickly. Back on Earth, in the repurposed Hegemony Command Center, Commander Reyes watched the approaching fleet on the tactical display. They're coming in hot, Lieutenant Okafor noted. Weapons powered, no attempt at communication. Reyes nodded, unsurprised. Exactly as expected. The hegemony has one response to challenges to their authority. Dr. Chen entered the command center, tablet in hand. The QDN is fully charged, and the targeting systems are locked. We've refined the calibration to 99.2% efficiency. And our guests? Rise asked. In position and surprisingly cooperative once they understood the alternative. Admiral Krasek was puzzled when his fleet reached the halfway point to Earth and still encountered no resistance. The human vessels remained in Earth orbit, making no move to intercept or retreat. Either they were paralyzed with fear or, Admiral, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the human ships. Pattern unknown. Before Krasek could respond, reality distorted around his fleet. Space itself seemed to fold, and suddenly, impossibly, his warships were surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels that had materialized from nowhere. Not human ships. These were the distinctive dart-shaped craft of the Saurians, the warrior race from the Epsilon sector, ancient enemies of the Drakari, renowned for their ferocity and their grudge against the hegemony that had subjugated their homeworld centuries ago. Impossible, Krasek breathed. His communication officer turned with panic in his eyes. Admiral, we're being hailed by Administrator Vor from one of the Saurian vessels. The main screen activated to show the reptilian face of the captured Earth Administrator, flanked by Saurian warriors. Admiral Krasek, Vor said, his voice strained. The humans have formed an alliance with the Saurian resistance. They've developed technology that can transport ships and personnel across vast distances instantaneously. They've been using it to contact and arm every species with a grievance against the hegemony. Lies. Krasek snarled. The Saurian resistance is contained in their home system. Not anymore, came Commander Rice's voice as she stepped into view beside Vor. We've been busy this past week. While you were gathering your fleet, we were gathering allies. As if to emphasize her point, more ships appeared around the hegemony fleet, vessels of various designs from a dozen different species, all races that the hegemony had conquered or exploited over the centuries. You're outnumbered, Admiral, Rice continued, and our quantum displacement technology means we can bring in reinforcements faster than you can target them. I suggest you reconsider your approach. Across the galaxy, the hegemony was facing an unprecedented crisis. Reports flooded in of coordinated uprisings on 30 different worlds. Species that had been subjugated for generations were suddenly armed with advanced weapons and supported by allies they shouldn't have been able to contact. On the Hegemony Council station, Director Vex received the reports with growing horror. The humans hadn't just developed a new transportation technology. They had weaponized it into the most effective system for insurgency the galaxy had ever seen. How could they have done this? Demanded Council Member Threk. How could one primitive species coordinate such a massive rebellion? Because we underestimated them, Vex replied grimly. We saw their divisions and conflicts as weaknesses. We failed to recognize that those same traits make them uniquely suited to understand oppression and resistance. In the Sol system, Admiral Krasek faced an impossible tactical situation. His fleet was surrounded, outgunned, with no chance of reinforcement arriving in time. For the first time in his military career, he ordered a retreat. As the hegemony warships withdrew, Commander Rice addressed her allies aboard the captured platforms. Phase 3 is complete. The hegemony now understands they cannot defeat us through military force. They'll have no choice but to negotiate. Saurian Commander Thex, a towering reptilian warrior with battle scars across his scaled hide, regarded Rice with newfound respect. For centuries, my people fought the hegemony alone. We believed no other species had the will to challenge them. We were wrong about humans. The hegemony's greatest weapon was isolation, Rice explained. They kept subjugated species separated, prevented us from communicating, from recognizing our common cause. Once we broke that isolation with the QDN, everything changed. 3 days later, a single hegemony diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth under a flag of truce. Director Vex himself had come to negotiate, a concession unprecedented in hegemony history. The meeting took place in what had once been the United Nations headquarters in New York, now repurposed as Earth's diplomatic center. Representatives from 12 formerly subjugated species sat alongside human leaders. "You have created an untenable situation," Director Vex began, his normally imposing presence diminished by the circumstances. "The hegemony cannot allow this rebellion to continue." "This isn't a rebellion anymore," Director Rice countered. "It's a revolution. And it's already succeeded." She activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Nearly a third of hegemony territory was now controlled by liberated species. "Your choice is simple," Rice continued. "Continue fighting a war you cannot win, against an alliance that grows stronger each day, or recognize the sovereignty of Earth and all other worlds that choose independence." "And if we refuse?" Vex challenged. The Saurian Commander Thex leaned forward, his reptilian eyes cold. "Then we finish what we started. The hegemony falls completely." Vex studied the faces around the table, species that had been enemies for generations, now united against the hegemony. At the center of it all were the humans, a species they had dismissed as primitive barely 3 decades ago. "How did you do it?" he finally asked Rice. "How did you develop such technology under our surveillance?" Commander Rice smiled. "You watched us very carefully, but you watched for the wrong things. You monitored our official research institutions, our recognized scientists. You never noticed the hobbyists, the tinkerers, the dreamers working in garages and basements. Human innovation doesn't just come from the top, it bubbles up from below." She gestured to Dr. Chen. "The quantum displacement network wasn't developed in a government lab. It began with theoretical work by physicists who published their findings disguised as science fiction. The engineers who built the first prototype were university students working on what appeared to be an art installation. You hit a technological revolution, in plain sight." Vex seemed incredulous. "We hid it in our culture," Rice corrected. "In our creativity, our entertainment, our seemingly irrational pursuits, all the aspects of humanity you dismissed as inefficient or frivolous." The negotiations lasted for 5 days. When they concluded, the galaxy had been transformed. The galactic hegemony would continue to exist, but as a commonwealth of equal members rather than an empire. Earth and its allies would form a new coalition, the Stellar Accord, based on principles of self-determination and mutual defense. 2 months later, Commander Rice stood on the observation deck of Earth's first official diplomatic vessel as it approached the newly established Stellar Accord headquarters, a massive space station constructed at a neutral location using human quantum displacement technology. Dr. Chen joined her, gazing out at the assembled ships from 24 different species. "When we started Project Lazarus," he said quietly, "we just wanted to free Earth. I never imagined it would lead to this." "That's the thing about humans," Rice replied. "We rarely stop at the original goal. Once we realize something is possible, we immediately start thinking about what else we could do with it." Below them, Earth rotated peacefully, no longer under the shadow of hegemony control. Around the planet, construction had begun on a new generation of ships, vessels designed not for war, but for exploration. Now that humanity had broken free of its chains, the true journey could begin. "The hegemony never expected us to strike first," Rice mused. "But their greater mistake was not understanding what would happen after we did." Dr. Chen nodded. "They thought of us as unpredictable and dangerous. They never realized that those same qualities make us remarkably good at finding solutions to impossible problems." As their ship docked with the Stellar Accord Station, representatives from 24 species waited to greet them. Former enemies, now allies, united by a common cause that had begun with humanity's refusal to accept subjugation. The hegemony had spent centuries building an empire based on control and hierarchy. In just a few short months, humans had transformed it into something entirely new, not through overwhelming force, but through connection, creativity, and the stubborn belief that there is always another way. In the great ledger of galactic history, it would be recorded as the moment everything changed, when Earth struck first, and the stars themselves were rearranged.